right? So if the Day of Atonement was just a regular feast, then you would say, well, 1844, October 22, 1840 was a day. 1844 was the Day of Atonement. Then it would have been that day is the Day of Atonement. Or you say, well, prophetically, a day equals a year. Okay, so the year from October 22 to 1844 to the year October 22, 1845 would have been the Day of Atonement. But none of you believe that. Most of you believe you're still living in the Day of Atonement. Well, how is that possible? The Day of Atonement began on October 22, 1844, and you're still living in the Day of Atonement 176 years later. Then what's your theological rationale to tell me that the Day of Atonement stretches 176 years? Did Pentecost stretch 100 years? Did Passover stretch 100 years? How many days was Jesus in the tomb? No. So you see, the early feast is literal time. It's one day. And then the wave sheaf happens a day after the Sabbath. It's literal time. It's a literal day. Now, even when you get to the Feast of Trumpets, like day equals years, so the Feast of Trumpets is 10 days. It lasts 10 years, another 1833 to 1844. But when you come to the Day of Atonement, all that stuff changes. I know you're looking at me silly, but Adventists have never processed the theological basis to say that the Day of Atonement just keeps going on. Well, the theological basis for the Day of Atonement to not be literally confined to one day or one literal year of prophetic time is that the Day of Atonement is a Sabbath. And it's like layers of onion. The Sabbath has different layers and it lasts until God says so. God knows the time. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Well, I'm just trying to help you understand, because at some point someone's going to question you and say, what you're saying doesn't make sense. And it's true. I mean, we need to understand why what we're saying makes sense, because it does make sense. But the point is the Day of Atonement is the Sabbath. That's in Leviticus 23:24 when it talks about the feast. And when Paul describes the feast in Colossians, he gives the three categories. And the last one he gives is the Sabbath, because he has to say it that way, because the Day of Atonement is the Sabbath. The Day of Atonement isn't the same as the other feasts.
Leviticus 23:32 shall be unto you as a Sabbath of rest, and you shall afflict your souls. And the 9th day of the month at even, from even unto even, you shall celebrate your Sabbath.
Let them look it up and read it. It was good. They can find it.
I'm wrestling with this idea of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
And I didn't know
Thank you.
about the Sabbath, but my thought was on the Day of Atonement, the high priest went in, most holy place. They didn't know what he was going to say.
Yes, but the thing is, liturgically, the Day of Atonement was one day, right? So what we have, because we have to wrestle these things, because people, you don't think Satan's going to let you get away with this idea of telling other people about the Sabbath and the gospel, and not questioning where there's holes in your thinking to make you look like you don't know what you're talking about, so you can throw everything away. You think he's going to let you get away with that? No, he's not. We need to think these things through, and we should be asking ourselves these questions.
But there was no guarantee when the high priest was going to come out of on that day.
No, but he was either going to walk out or they're going to drag him out that day. There was no, the Day of Atonement was not the next day. What I'm saying is that the Day of Atonement can't be seen like the other feasts are seen. Otherwise, it would make no sense. So it's only when you understand the Day of Atonement is a Sabbath, and then it has the Sabbath in the Bible has different connotations. There's a daily Sabbath every week. There's a monthly Sabbath every month. There's a yearly Sabbath every year. There's a Sabbath of years every 7 years. And there's a years of years Sabbath every 49 years. And then there's another Sabbath every 1,000 years. The Sabbath has different levels and layers to it. And so only when you begin to understand that the Sabbath has this connotation, you begin to understand that the Day of Atonement is more than just a one single day. It has levels like an onion, same as the Sabbath. Because the Day of Atonement is a Sabbath. That's why the 7th month, by the way, is a Sabbath month, because as the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles are in the 7th month. And that's the Sabbath month, because of the Day of Atonement. Does that make sense? So we're in the Day of Atonement.
Started in 1844.
The third part, yes, started in 1844. Yes, John.
Do you think Paul may have been referring to this some in Hebrews when he talked about entering into a rest? And that idea is pretty clear. The rest is not meant to be a single day,
Right.
but it's a Sabbath. It's a Sabbath. what he means is Sabbath, but it stands over grace. It's
That's right.
Really the rest of the life.
Well, it's a state of existence that you enter into in your mind when you enter into God's rest. Right, that's right.
And so that idea of the Sabbath, and the Sabbath rest, is a Sabbath that it may have a beginning, but hopefully has no end.
When we go to heaven for that 1,000 years, that's a Sabbath. That 1,000 years is a Sabbath, right? It's a 7,000 years of Earth's history. The first 6,000 years were sin. The seventh of 1,000 years is going to be a Sabbath. You're going to heaven to celebrate a Sabbath. It just happens to extend 1,000 years. That's why the Day of Atonement, which is the Sabbath, can extend from October 22, 1844, and still be a Day of Atonement today, because it's a Sabbath. I'm sharing this with you so that you will get back to studying your Bible and stop thinking that you know the truth and that you have it and you're all ready for Jesus to come. Because the sanctuary liturgy, the Levites, the priests knew the sanctuary liturgy. It wasn't their job to teach the rest of the other tribes the sanctuary liturgy. That wasn't their job. But it was their job to understand the sanctuary liturgy and what they were doing. Right? So the point is, what I'm sharing with you, because you're Adventist, about being that priest and understanding the liturgy, you're supposed to be sharing with other Adventists, because we need to awaken God's messenger about being God's messenger so we can get about God's message. But your message to the world, you're meeting the minds of the people where they're at and giving them what they need to understand, whatever it happens to be. By the way, now, we tend to think we know so much more than other people. There's a lot of Christians out there that know a lot of things, and they're going to ask you difficult questions because they've been studying the Bible. So I'm just trying to give you enough information so that you understand principles so you can grow yourself, and then hopefully